Welcome back. So here we are, Module 5. We're still talking about strings, and these are probably some of the longer videos because there's a lot to worry about when it comes to strings. We use strings probably more than we do anything else. When you think about it in your day-to-day routine, do you use more words or numbers? For the most part, we use more words than we do numbers, and there's a lot more rules that are kind of vague and ambiguous at times when it comes to words. So I talked about in the last video the Len function. I can take this name variable that has Henny in it, and we can use the replace function that's part of the string class. So name is an instance of the string class. Name is an object. An instance of a class is an object. So that string class, so you know what, I want to create an instance of that string, and I'm going to call it name. And with it, it inherits all of the functionality associated with the parent class string. And in that parent class string is a function called replace. I don't need to know how that thing works. I just need to know what's it going to do for me and what's it need from me. Well, the replace function, if I pass it two arguments, it's going to take the first and replace it with the second. Wait a minute. How does that work if a string is immutable? You can't change the character. Right up here above, we went through that. Well, remember I said, I don't need to know how this thing works, just that it works. I can't manually go do that. I can't manually go put a P in the first position. I can in other languages, but I can't in this one. But what I can do is I can take that name object, I can take that variable name, and I can use that functionality that essentially overwrites the whole string and takes whatever H's were there and replaces them with P's. If there was more than one, it would replace more than one. So we're limited on how this works. It's not as precise as we may want it to be. There may be a time that I may have to put two characters in for it to work the way I want it to work, and it not change all of them. So look for HE and change it with PE. It's a little more explicit about how it's taking place. But that's functionality that's built into the string class. Now there's a large list of functionality in Python's library for the string class. It's all built-in stuff. And inevitably they will add more to it, and they'll modify how things work. It's the different iterations of Python. Got a web page here, and I'll put a link in the resources. And I didn't create it. I've said it before. I'm a programmer. I'm not lazy. I'm efficient and reuse things that I didn't necessarily create. But if it works, I can use it. So here's a list of must-know string functions for Python. There's the format function. We're going to talk about that a lot in this next video. Talked about it a little bit in the last one. We're going to talk about it a lot in the next. Split, we're about to talk about that. Join, strip, format. There's a ton of different ones. And if we just clicked on whichever one is there, it should take us, well, it should have taken us to another page. He doesn't have his page built out yet. They didn't work. So each one will have a different functionality, and you go do a search for whatever it may be. Format Python function strip, and in the Python white pages, it'll come up. There's plenty of support in Python to explain all the built-in functionality. But this was just a quick list that I went and found, and I may put a link to a better list than this in the resources for this module. So here's a list of different things you got to know, especially when it comes to strings. There's all things that you commonly would do with string. Now here's some other ones that are good to know. And these may be things that you don't use it that often. The index. What's the index of P? It'll tell you exactly what index the letter P is. And it's the first time it found P. That's why they say the lowest index. And then here's a bunch of just miscellaneous. Check to see if all the cases are lower, or I can convert them all to lowercase. There's so many things that we can do relative to a string. Okay. Now, let's go back. Let's look at this module, or this chapter. So I talked about this. We used the replace function. I talked about this, how this worked in the range, and this is going to be able to, in the future when we come down here, we're slicing up that string in pieces, starting at the first and ending with whatever number's there. So if this was empty, we'd start at 0. If this is empty, you go to the end. So beginning to end, unless you put some numbers in there. And then we go in and carve up a little piece of the string, depending on where we start and where we end. And that came from the last video. Letters start at 20 and go to the end. Well, do we need to know where the end is? No, it knows. It goes until it finds the end of the string. From 10 on. From index 12 to index 15. We're just picking up where we left off on the last one. We talked about this before. The negative means start at the end and work your way forward. Oh, so we're going to go backwards. Start at the end and go forward 3. Start at the end and go backwards 3. Okay. Where do we start? Well, with this one, that's a little bit different. Start at number 18 and go until we hit 3 from the end. If we look at it that way, start 3 from the end and go to the end. Start at 18, go to 3 from the end. Start 6 from the end and stop 2 from the end. This one is a little bit different. So we're going to go through this from start to finish 7 at a time, every 7th character. So the start, it's A. 7 characters later, H. 7 characters later, O. So we did the start, one index, 0. 7 forward is 6. What's the index for 6? Is it F? A? 0, B, 1, C2, D, 3, E, 4, F, 5, G, 6, H, 7. So we go from 0 to 7. And then we'll move another 7, and we'll move another 7. That's how that works. You won't use this that common, but just understand how you're doing it, how it works. Start, end, frequency. Start at 4. You're going to go to 20 every third one. Start at 19. Go to the end every fourth one. Start at 0. Go to 21 every fifth one. Start, wait a minute. I start -1. So I start at the end. I'm going backwards. Start at the end, go backwards to the beginning, I guess, because we're going to go one at a time the opposite direction. Displayed the whole thing backwards. Well, that's one way to go about it. This means backwards. I could have done it a little bit simpler. Start at 0, go to the end, but do it backwards. More than one way. Alright, so this one. Start 50 characters from the end. Start 50 characters from the end. It's before the end. There aren't 50 characters before the end. What's it do? It starts at the end and it goes as far as it can and says, here's all I got. I got to the beginning and that's all I got. Start 51 characters from the end and go 50 characters. It went all the way there, but there's nothing there. So there was nothing there, so there's nothing to give you. Go where there's nothing and you get nothing. This one, we're not talking about indexing on this. That's how far you can go. So on this one, start at the beginning and go until you've reached 70. Well, we hit the end first. Start at 70, go to the end. Same concept as back here. All right. So we've got a Len function, and it's written that way, Len. What's the length, or the length of letters? How long is it? How many characters? You gotta tell us, 26. What's the index of the last character in that string? Len letters -1. We've got empty as a variable. We put nothing in it. What's the len of empty? 0. There's nothing in there. No characters. Now, if I want to split things, split them up. So what I can do is I've got in this example, I have this variable called tasks. Tasks is a string of characters. And it has in it commas. Now, we can have a file in programming that has data stored in it for us. And it's a comma separated file, or CSV, comma separated values. In that file are values separated by commas. Whatever's in between those commas means something. It's separate, it's individual. And if we say, we're going to take this string of characters, and every time you find a comma, we're going to split it up into smaller strings. I'm going to talk about this later. What this means with these square braces. Essentially what it means is it's cutting it up into a list. We'll talk about that, as I said, later. But we're breaking up this string into smaller strings. That's the split function. Go find each one of the commas, and every time you find a comma, cut this thing into piece. Cut this thing into another piece. Cut it into another piece. The number of commas will tell you how many sections you're going to come up with. So if you got 3 commas, you'll have 4 sections. So that's the separator. Are you limited to just commas? No. It could be whatever character was used when this thing was assembled. By default, comma. By default, comma. Well, is it? Is it comma by default? No. By default, it's spaces. If I said tasks.split and I didn't pass it anything, it's going to go through this and look for spaces. And every time it finds a space, it's going to say, all right, there's the end of that string. Ding, 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 ding. Oh, there's another one. Ding, 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 ding. Oh, there's another one. You see it? So that's how that worked. If you're not explicit, it'll implicitly say, well, I'll go look for the spaces then. Right. Now, remember we had previous video, the concept of concatenation. That was in 5-2. Joining strings together, combining them. How can we combine strings? Well, we're jumping ahead a little bit with this. I'll touch on it real quick. But I said, hey, square braces, that's a list. We broke that string, we split it up into a list of strings. Well, I can take that list and say, you know what? I want to treat each one of those individual words, join them together with the join function. And anytime you find a comma, that's going to bring it together. That's going to be how we bring, or what decides how this thing is going to come together. You find the commas in there, we'll join them together, and that'll be our crypto string. And what's that string going to have in it? Yeti, comma Bigfoot, comma Loch Ness Monster. And it put that comma in between each one of the values. It ignored these. Ignored these. Took that string, joined it together with the next one, put a comma and space in between it. Comma and space in between it. It just so happens it's how we see it here. It's coincidental. What's happening right here is we're passing the print function this string literal constant value. Doesn't change. Every time you run this code, this will be the exact same. If you said this in 9 different print functions, it would always stay the same. And if you wanted to change it, you'd have to change it in 9 different print functions. If you had that multiple times, I would have taken this and put it up top in a constant and just referred to it by name, and then I changed it up there one time. Every time it came up, it would be changed. Plan ahead. If it's something that could potentially change over time or be used more than once, use it as a constant instead. But this is a string literal constant. Comma means pass it another argument, and then crypto string. Well, that's that joined string from the components in crypto list. And we'll talk about lists in the future. We talked about replace already. Go find something and replace it with something else. You can change, how many of them do you want to change? Up to 100 times. So every time you find an A, change it to A famous. If you had 2, well, what if you just had 1 there? It would only change 1 of them. A famous duck goes into a famous bar. A duck goes into a bar. Well, we changed every time they found A, they changed it to A famous. If you find 100 of them, change all 100. If you find 101, only change 100 of them. Pretty straightforward. This one, you didn't put the space in there and it kind of threw things off. Spacing matters. And beyond that, strip. We will use strip at times to strip off something from a string. I may want to strip from the left, strip from the right. Left strip, right strip, or just a generic strip. And depending on what gets stripped, we can remove a space. And it goes in, it looks for dead space. You got any dead space, extra characters that you don't need, just strip them off. So this says go strip off any extra space, anything that doesn't have anything, and it just goes for the end. It doesn't get rid of spaces within the string. It's all talking about the ends. So you have spaces at the ends, go find them and get rid of them. So it did that. We were explicit, said what we wanted it to get rid of. Go strip from just the left. Go strip from just the right. Go get rid of exclamation point. Well, I don't have any. Well, if there was one, we get rid of them. What the? And it got rid of any instance of those characters. All gone. Okay. If I want to search through a string, you're familiar with what's taking place here. Print off poem, start at the beginning and go to the 13th character. How many characters? Starts with function. And it's a question, it's a Boolean. Does it start with all? Yes or no? Ends with. Does it ends with, that's all, folks? No. It ends with question mark. or no. It ends with, what did we miss? I'm missing something in there. Oh, no. Not sure what I missed in there. Oh, no. Not sure what I missed in there. Why that doesn't come up the way that it is. You might find it, but I'm just not seeing it. All right. Index we dealt with. Find, you go find, it'll tell you what index it's at. It'll tell you what case it is. Are we talking about uppercase, lowercase? We can remove something or strip it, but we've got case, we're talking about capitalization. Is it upper? Do we want to make it lower? Turn them all to upper, turn them all to lower. Change from what it is to what you want it to be. Title, first letter of each word. Okay. And then there's some alignment functionality. Center it, left justify, right justify. That's how it's going to be displayed. I'm going to leave it there. These, like I said, this is probably one of the longer modules. These videos are a little bit longer. This is pushing half an hour. All right, so I'll see you in the last video, and all we're going to talk about is formatting in there. All right, so I will see you there.